Bang! Mu Chen was struck by a punch from the Divine Wood Guard. His body was sent flying like a massive boulder, crashing heavily onto the ground. The earth instantly cracked open, and as the fissure spread, Mu Chen's body left a trail over 100 meters long before he managed to stabilize himself, albeit in a somewhat disheveled manner. Pfft. A mouthful of fresh blood spurted from Mu Chen's mouth, and his face turned pale. He had taken the punch head-on. Had it not been for his cultivation in the Thunder God body, his life might have been in danger. Luo Li's face changed upon seeing this. Her delicate form moved swiftly, appearing beside Mu Chen. She looked at his serious injuries and asked anxiously, "How are you? Why didn't you dodge?" Although the Divine Wood Guard's attack was fierce, if Mu Chen had wanted to avoid it, this attack clearly wouldn't have hurt him. TSK, looks like you're in worse shape than I thought," Xun'er said with a smirk, watching Mu Chen's injuries with amusement. Mu Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and raised his head to smile at Xun'er. There was a hint of mockery in his smile. "I told you before, there's a saying, don't get too cocky. Why don't you try activating the Divine Wood Guard again?" Upon hearing this, Xun'er's expression immediately darkened. His hand seal changed rapidly, but then his face turned even darker when he realized that this time, his attempt to activate the Divine Wood Guard had no effect at all. The Divine Wood Guard still stood in the Great Hall, but there was no response to his control. "Bastard, what did you do to the Divine Wood Guard?" Xun'er's eyelids twitched, his voice filled with fury. Mu Chen casually smiled. "I didn't do anything. I simply sealed the rune seal that you used to control the Divine Wood Guard." Xun'er's gaze shot toward the Divine Wood Guard, and sure enough, he saw that a series of black lines had appeared around the leaf-shaped rune on the Divine Wood Guard's forehead. These lines interwoven, seemingly forming some sort of seal, completely locked away the tree pattern rune. As a result, this seal had isolated the control he once had over the Divine Wood Guard. Xun'er's expression grew increasingly grim. He hadn't expected Mu Chen to see through his control over the Divine Wood Guard so quickly, nor that Mu Chen would be able to seal it. Xun'er could feel that the sealing power was extremely peculiar, completely cutting off the connection between the tree pattern rune and the Divine Wood Guard, severing his control over it. Now, the Divine Wood Guard was almost entirely out of his control. His most powerful trump card had been neutralized without warning by Mu Chen. Xun'er's body trembled with anger, his eyes burning with fury. He looked as though he wanted nothing more than to tear Mu Chen apart. Tang Meier, Zhou Yuan, Su Huang, and the others, who had been ensnared by the vines, sighed in relief upon witnessing this. The greatest support Xun'er's side had was the Divine Wood Guard, and now that it had been dealt with by Mu Chen, Xun'er's group would lose much of their fighting strength. At this moment, Luo Li understood why Mu Chen had taken the risk of enduring a punch from the Divine Wood Guard instead of retreating. However, she still glared at him with a frown and scolded, "You always act recklessly." Mu Chen smiled and reached out, taking Luo Li's delicate hand. His face was pale, showing clear signs of injury. He had already fought fiercely with Xia Ho, and now with the Divine Wood Guard, so his condition wasn't the best. It left him feeling helpless. Though he had many methods, his own strength was only in the late heaven-reaching stage. While his battle power far exceeded his apparent level, as the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition progressed, the opponents they faced would only grow stronger. Now that they had made it into the top 16, once they left this relic, their position would be exposed, and they would face many challengers. The battles ahead would likely be even more intense than the ones they had fought so far. His current strength in the late heaven-reaching stage was beginning to show its limits. After all, he couldn't afford to exhaust himself every time he faced a master of the spiritual energy tribulation. Otherwise, sooner or later, he would be caught by the hidden enemies who were watching them closely. "It looks like I need to break through as well," Mu Chen thought to himself. He clenched his hand tightly. Their team needed breakthroughs, not just Su Wang and Zhao Qishan, but also himself. Otherwise, advancing to the final battle would be nearly impossible. Luo Li gently squeezed Mu Chen's hand, then lifted her delicate face. Her clear eyes were filled with cold resolve as she glanced at Xun'er, her voice soft but firm. "For the next battle, you're not allowed to participate." Mu Chen was momentarily stunned. Although he had just taken down the Divine Wood Guard, they still faced a large number of opponents, and Xun'er was no pushover either. His strength wasn't any weaker than Xiaoho's. With several teammates undergoing the physical body tribulation, their power was still formidable. Luo Li planned to take on so many opponents alone. "Let's work together, alright? Don't hurt yourself too much, or you'll have me worrying," Mu Chen said with a bitter smile. I want to make you worry, Luo Li replied with a teasing smile. Her delicate face, as beautiful as porcelain, flushed faintly, revealing her usually calm nature. She didn't often say such things to Mu Chen. That's what you get for always acting recklessly. This is your punishment. Luo Li gently touched Mu Chen's face with her slender jade hand, smiling faintly. Then, she playfully blinked her clear eyes at him. Be good, I'll protect you. Faced with Luo Li, who now had a somewhat regal aura, Mu Chen couldn't help but touch his nose, feeling a little meek. He shrugged helplessly. Be careful. Luo Li nodded lightly, smiling. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. Mu Chen couldn't help but grin. It seemed like Luo Li, though not yet the queen of the Luo god clan, was already showing signs of her domineering nature. She had never liked to draw attention when she was by his side, but today, seeing him injured so many times, it seemed to have angered her. Now, she was no longer hiding her true power. Luo Li gracefully stood up, her jade hand gripping the Luo god's sword. The playful smile she had when facing Mu Chen had vanished, replaced by a cold frost. Her clear eyes shot an icy glare at Xun'er. What's this? Do you think you can take us all down by yourself? Xun'er sneered, his anger boiling. He watched Luo Li's movements and sneered coldly. Luo Li didn't respond to him. Her jade hand simply tightened around the Luo god's sword and slowly lifted it. Buzz! The Luo god's sword vibrated slightly, releasing an overwhelming sword intent, as if it could pierce through heaven and earth. Xun'er felt the powerful sword intent, and his expression grew cold. He turned his gaze to the remaining 4 members of the Sacred Spirit Academy team, and said in a low voice, Join us. If we defeat her, you'll get your revenge. All the points and treasures here will be yours, half and half. How about it? Although Xia Ho was gravely injured and his life was uncertain, the remaining 4 still possessed formidable strength. Bringing them over would be a powerful addition in dealing with Luo Li. The 4 of them exchanged glances, then gritted their teeth and nodded. Despite the shock Mu Chen had given them earlier, the latter was clearly in a poor state. As long as they teamed up to deal with Luo Li, they could avenge themselves. Swish! The 4 figures moved in unison, appearing behind Luo Li and surrounding her with Xun'er's team. Spiritual energy surged, creating immense pressure around her. Humph! Even with a divine weapon, I don't believe you can defeat all of us on your own. Xun'er sneered. They had 10 people, and more than half of them were at the physical body tribulation stage. With his own strength at the spiritual energy tribulation stage, how could Luo Li, alone, defeat them? Luo Li glanced at him indifferently, but said nothing. Her beautiful eyes slowly closed. As her eyes closed, blood began to seep from her tightly gripped hand around the Luo god's sword. The blood flowed down the blade, forming a faint crimson sword pattern. Boom! A terrifying sword aura suddenly erupted from the Luo god's sword, as if a sealed, terrifying force was gradually awakening. Attack! Xun'er sensed the sword aura, and his face changed drastically. He immediately ordered, his voice low and urgent. Boom! As soon as his command was given, all 10 of them attacked simultaneously. A torrent of spiritual energy surged forth, overwhelming and closing in on Luo Li from all directions. Luo Li's beautiful eyes remained closed. With a slight shake of her jade hand, a terrifying sword aura burst forth, sweeping around her like a violent storm. Any attacks that collided with the sword aura were torn apart into nothingness. The blood-red sword pattern on the Luo god sword grew brighter, while a faint pallor appeared on Luo Li's delicate face. The Luo god sword emitted a sharp and urgent hum. In the next instant, Luo Li's eyes suddenly opened, her jade-like arm moving in a graceful arc. The sword chi surged out, drawing intricate patterns in the air, leaving behind brilliant sword marks in the void before her. The sword marks quickly interlaced, and in the blink of an eye, the sword chi exploded. Amidst the flashing light, a sword lotus roughly 100 feet in diameter rapidly took shape before Luo Li. The sword lotus was extraordinarily beautiful, yet beneath its beauty lay a power that seemed almost destructive. Luo Li's sword trembled, and the sword lotus slowly ascended. In the next instant, a blinding light filled every corner of the giant hall. As the light spread, Luo Li's clear, melodious voice, like a mountain stream winding through a ravine, softly resonated throughout the hall. Sword Heart Illumination, Luo God Sword Lotus. Buzz. The radiant sword lotus floated up before Luo Li, hovering in midair, its luminous brilliance spreading to every corner of the hall. However, this light did not bring warmth. Instead, it caused a deep chill to permeate the bodies of those present. They could all sense that within that light was a terrifyingly sharp sword intent, one that seemed capable of tearing apart the very heavens and earth. Mu Chen gazed at this scene with a faint shiver. Even he could feel the coldness in his body from the sword intent within the lotus. Xun'er and the others also wore grave expressions, their eyes filled with a trace of horror. Beneath the beauty of the sword lotus, they sensed a heavy aura of death. Luo Li had no intention of warming up to them. As soon as she made her move, it was a full-blown trump card. Seeing their shocked expressions, Luo Li's face remained as cold as frost. She extended her delicate jade finger and lightly tapped the air. Buzz. The sword lotus trembled again, and its petals slowly unfurled. In the next instant, a towering sword chi erupted. The 10 lotus petals shot out suddenly, their beauty overshadowed by an unstoppable sharpness. Whoosh! Whoosh! The lotus petals streaked through the void, leaving behind shallow rifts in the space itself. On the ground below, the sword chi that seeped through instantly carved deep, pitch-black sword marks into the floor. The 10 beautiful petals of the sword lotus moved like divine swords, speeding towards Xun'er and the others. As they saw the petals racing towards them, Xun'er and the others' pupils constricted. Even though the attack hadn't arrived yet, they could already feel a stinging sensation on their skin. It was almost unimaginable how terrifying the sword intent on those petals was. Use all your strength. Xun'er shouted. Boom. His roar was followed by a massive surge of spiritual energy that rushed out of his body like a tidal wave. The other 9 also hastily activated their spiritual power, unleashing their strongest techniques without hesitation. At this point, if they held anything back, they would likely face certain death, as the sword lotus petals were too terrifying. Would God spear? Holy light palm. Roars echoed, accompanied by a torrent of spiritual energy and overwhelming offensive power. Xun'er's face grew even graver. His palm shot out abruptly, and a vast surge of spiritual power swept through the area. Amidst the flashing light, it seemed to transform into a giant hand like an ancient pine, covered in light runes. The energy surged like an ocean, exuding an extreme sense of oppressive strength. Clearly, he was using his full power. Divine Pine Hand. Boom. Under the gaze of many eyes, the powerful offensive force collided with the lotus petals in an instant. Luo Li's clear, beautiful eyes remained calm, but a cold glint appeared in them. She then flicked her slender jade finger lightly, and the space before her seemed to tear open. Whoosh! The two forces collided, but contrary to expectations, there was no earth-shattering clash. The beautiful lotus petals, seemingly delicate, were as sharp as divine sword blades, and they sliced through the powerful spiritual attacks with ease. Their offensive techniques barely made any impact on the sword lotus petals. The members of the two opposing teams were now completely shocked. A sense of indescribable fear surged in their hearts. They hadn't expected Luo Li's killing move to be this powerful. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to stop even a single petal. As the petals of the lotus sword cut through the sky, a cold aura enveloped the area. The 9 figures froze in place as the blood sprayed out. Their arms were severed cleanly, with smooth, mirror-like breaks. Ah! A piercing scream echoed as the figures fell to the ground, clutching their severed arms, wailing in pain. Their previously powerful spiritual energy quickly weakened, and blood flowed endlessly from the severed limbs, clearly tainted by the sharp sword intent that had penetrated their bodies. No matter how hard they tried to summon their spiritual energy, they couldn't rid themselves of it. Luo Li remained unfazed by the screams, her beautiful eyes focused ahead. There, the lotus sword petals hadn't broken through with unstoppable force as before. They had been temporarily halted by Xun'er's attack. After all, Xun'er, having passed the spiritual energy tribulation, was far stronger than the other 9. Although Xun'er had temporarily stopped the lotus sword petals, he was clearly exhausted. Sweat appeared on his forehead, and the terrifying sword intent caused his internal spiritual energy to become unstable. Damn it! Xun'er gritted his teeth, his heart trembling from the screams. He hadn't expected Luo Li's attack to be this terrifying. This assault was probably on par with Mu Chen's previous strike, but while Mu Chen's attack was aimed at an individual, Luo Li's could target many enemies at once. Indeed, worthy of someone who's passed the spiritual energy tribulation. Luo Li's gaze fell on Xun'er, who had managed to hold his ground, and she said faintly, She then gripped the Luo god sword, making the blade tremble slightly. Hum. The sound of the sword's hum filled the air. The sword petals that had severed the other nine's limbs suddenly shot back and formed a circle, rushing toward Xun'er with lightning speed. This scene sent Xun'er into a panic, his soul nearly leaving his body. He had barely managed to block a single sword petal, and now there were 9 more coming for him. Though the petals had been weakened by their collision with the other 9, they were still capable of killing him. Bastard! Xun'er gritted his teeth and slammed his palm onto the ground. Dark green spiritual energy surged outward, flooding the giant hall. Boom! The massive columns around him began to tremble, and countless vines shot out, quickly surrounding Xun'er and forming a protective shield. Bang! Bang! The sword petals struck fiercely, shattering the layers of vines and sending wood chips flying. You won't get what I can't. Xun'er twisted his face, realizing he had run out of options. With Luo Li's overwhelming strength, it was clear the treasures in this ruin would never be his. Boom! Xun'er's expression twisted in rage as his hand sealed a new spell. Several dark green beams shot out, striking the colossal pillars. Hum! Ancient tree patterns began to appear on the pillars, glowing brightly as if they had been activated. Intense spiritual energy fluctuations swept through the air, and cracks spread rapidly across the pillars. Boom! With the tree patterns now fully illuminated, the enormous columns supporting the hall exploded, releasing a devastating surge of spiritual energy that raged like a storm. The vines surrounding Tang Mayer and the others were shredded to pieces, and as their bodies were freed, the shockwave caused them to spit blood, their bodies being tossed by the windstorm. The hall collapsed, and as the space twisted, rifts formed, swallowing Tang Mayer and the others into them. It seemed that Xun'er had activated the self-destruct mechanism of the hall. Haha, you will all be expelled soon. Remember this, it's not over yet. Next time, I'll make you pay in blood for this. Xun'er's face twisted in fury. He laughed coldly, then flicked his sleeve, causing vines to shoot out rapidly, wrapping around the 4 members of his team. As his body retreated swiftly, he entered a spatial rift, clearly no longer concerned about Xiaoho and the others. Chen was slightly startled by the sudden turn of events. His figure shot forward, arriving next to Luo Li. At the same time, Su Huang, Zhao Qishan, and Mu Fengong, who had also broken free, quickly joined them. What should we do? It seems like this place is about to collapse, Su Huang asked urgently. Chen furrowed his brow, then his gaze shifted to the divine wood guard in the giant hall, which he had previously sealed. Clearly, this was the true treasure here. They had already expended a lot of energy, and he certainly didn't want to leave empty-handed. Take it, Chen decisively commanded. With a low shout, he shot forward and appeared in front of the divine wood guard, grabbing it, intending to store it in his Xun'er bracelet. But he quickly realized it was impossible. Damn it! Chen cursed under his breath. He looked at the rapidly expanding spatial rifts, stomped his foot, and activated the Thunder God body. Grabbing the massive arm of the divine wood guard, he seemed to be attempting to carry it away by sheer strength. Creak. The weight of the divine wood guard was as immense as a mountain. Even with the Thunder God body activated, Chen was still weighed down, sinking slightly, beads of cold sweat appearing on his forehead. Swish. Luo Li, Su Huang, and the others saw this and rushed over. Together, they extended their hands to hold onto the divine wood guard, channeling their spiritual energy, and worked with Chen to lift the enormous being. Let's go, but be careful. Chen smiled at the 4 of them, before charging toward a spatial rift. Whoosh. The 5 of them, carrying the divine wood guard, charged out, heading straight for the violent spiritual energy fluctuations. Finally, they leaped into the spatial rift and quickly disappeared. Boom, boom. As Chen and the others vanished into the rift, the giant hall could no longer withstand the pressure and finally collapsed completely. In the midst of the raging spiritual energy storm, the entire hall disappeared without a trace. This was a barren mountain range, desolate and sparsely populated, with the air thick with a sense of abandonment. Hiss! At this moment, the space above the barren mountains twisted, forming a spatial rift. As the rift fluctuated, several figures were thrown out in a disheveled state. One massive figure fell like a meteor, crashing into a mountain peak below and causing it to collapse. Chen stabilized his body midair. He shook himself off, quickly channeling his spiritual energy, and looked around warily. Once he confirmed there was no immediate danger, he sighed in relief. Around him, Luo Li and the others also stabilized themselves. They gazed at the unfamiliar terrain, realizing that they were no longer where they had been before entering the ancient ruins palace. "It seems like we don't know where that spatial rift threw us," Su Huang said, looking at Mu Chen. Mu Chen nodded, took out his academy token, checked their location, and smiled. "It's all right. We're still on the relic continent. Let's check our loot." Mu Chen darted down and landed in front of the Divine Wood Guard, which had caused the mountain peak to collapse. The Divine Wood Guard stood silently, its withered wood-like body faintly glowing. There was a hidden, yet chilling, aura of power emanating from it. This guardian was undoubtedly incredibly powerful. If we can control this Divine Wood Guard, only a master who has passed the Divine Soul Tribulation might be able to stop it, Luo Li said, her expression serious as she looked at the Divine Wood Guard. If it weren't for Mu Chen's special method to seal it earlier, even if she and Mu Chen teamed up, they would have had to pay a heavy price to deal with it. Divine Soul Tribulation, Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and the others couldn't help but gasp. Such power was undoubtedly rare, even among the experts of the fiercely competitive Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. Mu Chen's black eyes also glinted with heat. If they could truly control this Divine Wood Guard, it would be an immense asset to them. But this Divine Wood Guard seems to require that special rune seal to control, and that seal has already been refined by Xun'er. Trying to control it now would likely be very difficult, Luo Li said, her brows furrowing slightly. Luo Li and the others also nodded. When they first laid eyes on the Divine Wood Guard, they saw that it was wearing a magical wooden armor that shimmered with light runes. However, when Xun'er controlled it, the armor vanished. At the same time, it seemed the Divine Wood Guard was holding a wooden stele in its hands. Mu Chen moved and appeared at the forehead of the Divine Wood Guard. He gazed at a tree pattern rune seal there, pondering for a moment. Suddenly, he extended his fingers, curling them like claws to grab the rune seal. Buzz! It seemed that the Divine Wood Guard sensed Mu Chen's movement, as the rune seal erupted with waves of spiritual energy, seemingly trying to stop him. However, it was clearly in vain. Xun'er wasn't present to control the Divine Wood Guard and retaliate, so Mu Chen's fingers pierced through the spiritual energy waves and seized the tree pattern rune seal, pulling it directly from the Divine Wood Guard's forehead. The ancient, scent-filled tree pattern rune seal appeared in Mu Chen's palm. He studied it deeply, sensing a faint spiritual energy imprint at the center of the seal. The fluctuation of this energy belonged to Xun'er. This imprint was left by Xun'er within the rune seal, allowing him to control the Divine Wood Guard. Mu Chen sensed the spiritual imprint and smiled faintly. With a snap of his fingers, a dark flame appeared at his fingertip and shot into the rune seal. Hiss! The tree pattern rune seal immediately emitted a sizzling sound as the intricate internal structure of the seal reacted. But Mu Chen, being a spiritual array master, was far more adept than most at manipulating such fine powers. The dark flame that entered the rune seal did not disrupt its complex design, but instead homed in on Xun'er's spiritual imprint, slowly burning it away. Erasing Xun'er's spiritual imprint was no easy task. Even with Mu Chen's ability, it took careful and precise work, and after about half an hour of careful burning, the spiritual imprint was completely erased. Once the imprint was gone, the dark flame quickly condensed and formed a new spiritual energy imprint, now sitting in the center of the rune seal. This imprint was forged from the 9 nether flames, ensuring that if the rune seal were ever taken by someone else, the moment anyone tried to remove it, the 9 nether flames would explode, destroying the seal entirely. Clearly, Mu Chen's method was far more sophisticated than Xun'er's. Mu Chen played with the tree pattern rune seal, which now glowed faintly in his hand. However, the glow was a little dim, and he could also feel that the seal was slightly damaged. Did I cause this damage earlier? Mu Chen muttered to himself. When Xun'er had tried to take the seal, Mu Chen had attacked it, leaving this damage. And it was precisely because of this damage that the seal couldn't perfectly control the Divine Wood Guard. If it weren't for this, Mu Chen might not have been able to seal the Divine Wood Guard so easily. Mu Chen shook his head regretfully. It seemed that he would need to figure out a way to repair the seal. Moreover, he realized that the rune seal couldn't be used indefinitely. Each time its power was used, it would gradually deplete. Once all its energy was gone, the seal would lose its effect entirely. At that point, Mu Chen would no longer be able to control the Divine Wood Guard. Mu Chen smiled helplessly. Even if he had gained control of the Divine Wood Guard, he couldn't use it recklessly. As Mu Chen refined the rune seal, the Divine Wood Guard in front of him began to change once again. Its dry body shimmered with light, and a set of greenwood-colored armor reappeared. This armor was covered with complex light runes, radiating an extremely powerful aura. This set of greenwood armor was clearly a supreme-grade spiritual artifact with remarkable defensive power. Luo Li, holding the Luo God sword, unleashed a sword chi that struck the greenwood armor. However, this time, the sharp sword chi only left a shallow mark on the armor. Soon after, the greenwood armor's glow surged, and the mark was slowly repaired. Mu Chen, Su Huang, and the others looked on in astonishment. Truly a supreme-grade spiritual artifact, Su Huang and the others marveled. With such a powerful defensive artifact, even those facing the physical body tribulation wouldn't be able to harm them. If Shenqing had summoned this azurewood armor when controlling the Divine Wood Guard, we might not have had it so easy, Luo Li also commented in surprise. She knew the sharpness of the Luo God sword all too well. Although she hadn't fully activated the sword, the azurewood armor's defensive strength was undeniably formidable. Mu Chen nodded. It seemed the rune seal controlling the Divine Wood Guard had been damaged by him, preventing Shenqing from using it to unleash the guard's full strength. This also meant the azurewood armor couldn't be summoned. Mu Chen flicked his finger, and the rune seal flew into the Divine Wood Guard's forehead. The seal slowly sunk in, creating a strange sense of connection that filled Mu Chen's heart. At that moment, he felt as though he could control the Divine Wood Guard with a mere thought. He focused on the azurewood armor on the guard's body and grinned. With a mental push, the armor turned into a flash of light and fell into his palm. Since the rune seal was damaged, even if he could control the guard, it wouldn't be able to boost its combat power. So, it was better to take it. This azurewood armor should go to Luo Li, Mu Chen said, looking at Su Huang and the others. She already has the Luo God sword, which is an incredible offensive weapon. She lacks a strong defense, and with this, her balance between offense and defense will maximize our team's combat potential. Su Huang and the others smiled and nodded in agreement. They knew Mu Chen and Luo Li were the core strength of the team. As long as they were safe, the team was secure. Luo Li blinked her big eyes, looked at the azurewood armor Mu Chen handed her, smiled sweetly, and accepted it without hesitation. She truly needed an artifact with such strong defense to allow her to focus entirely on attacking with the Luo God sword. After handing the azurewood armor to Luo Li, Mu Chen's gaze shifted to another item held in the Divine Wood Guard's massive hand. It was a greenwood stele, about a foot in size, covered in intricate engravings. Faintly, it emitted a mysterious and powerful aura. Mu Chen stared at the greenwood stele, feeling an odd sensation. He believed that of all the items, the Divine Wood Guard, the azurewood armor, and the stele, the latter was the true treasure. The greenwood stele floated calmly in the Divine Wood Guard's colossal hand, exuding an ancient scent. Its body was covered in cryptic inscriptions, flickering with a faint glow, giving it an air of mystery. Mu Chen's eyes remained fixed on the stele. After a moment, he slowly extended his hand and reached for it. Buzz! The instant Mu Chen's hand touched the stele, it burst into a dazzling emerald light. The light spread out, causing fresh grass to sprout from the barren ground. A powerful force emanated from the stele, pushing back against Mu Chen's approach. Mu Chen frowned. He could feel the immense resistance. Even though he poured all his spiritual energy into the effort, he still couldn't break through the layers of emerald light. Humph! After a brief standoff, Mu Chen let out a cold snort. Black lightning suddenly crackled around his body as he activated his Thunder God body. The black lightning spiraled around his hand, and he grasped the steel with renewed force. Sizzle! When the black lightning met the emerald light, the latter trembled as though it had encountered its nemesis. It rapidly faded away. Thanks to countless tempering with black divine thunder, Mu Chen's body had become exceptionally resistant to it. The force on the greenwood steel was pure and powerful, but it was precisely this strength that the black divine thunder could counter. As the layers of emerald light dissipated under the lightning's power, Mu Chen's hand broke through, and he firmly grasped the steel in his palm. The moment the wooden steel landed in Mu Chen's hands, a green light suddenly shot out, striking his forehead with lightning speed. Mu Chen naturally sensed the green light, but he didn't perceive any hostility within it, so he didn't attempt to stop it. The green light hit his forehead and quickly merged into it. At the same time, an ancient stream of information exploded in his mind. It seemed like a series of ancient images. Within them, Mu Chen saw a vast and ancient hall complex. Each of these massive halls was even larger than the one in the previous ruins, and they were all constructed from special trees, seemingly fragile but incredibly strong. This was an ancient and colossal relic. In this relic, even the sky seemed to be a deep green, with towering ancient trees rising to the heavens, breaking through the clouds and exuding vitality. Vast spiritual energy rippled through the land, even forming greenish clouds in the sky. A series of images flashed rapidly through Mu Chen's mind. From these, he could sense the grandiosity and size of the relic, which shocked him. To leave behind such a magnificent ruin, the force behind it must have been a monumental power in the ancient times. This was the true, complete ancient ruin. Within it, there had to be an ancient inheritance. The relic they had discovered before paled in comparison to this one, like a small fish before a giant whale. As Mu Chen was lost in awe, the images flickered again, showing mist-wreathed mountain peaks. Atop the peaks, there were countless brilliant lights, and upon closer inspection, Mu Chen discovered that within each glowing mass, various treasures of heaven and earth were growing. These treasures were absorbing spiritual energy from the world, emitting pure spiritual fluctuations. With a quick glance, Mu Chen saw many rare and precious spiritual treasures, things that would make anyone jealous. It was almost like a mountain of spiritual treasures. Mu Chen's gaze shifted to the very peak of the mountain, where an intensely bright light was radiating, as if a blazing sun had risen. His eyes moved upward, and it became clearer. At the summit, a reddish-yellow hue dominated, and within a 1,000-foot radius, there were no other spiritual treasures present. But at the very top, a plant swayed gracefully. This plant resembled a spiritual herb, but while ordinary spiritual herbs have only one bloom, this one had 9. Moreover, the flowers were not in the shape of the typical herb, but were fiery spheres of light, about 10 feet in size. These orbs emitted boundless light, illuminating the land as if 9 blazing suns had appeared. The terrifying light radiated continuously, accompanied by even more frightening fluctuations of spiritual energy that spread out, making Mu Chen's heart race. His gaze locked onto this peculiar spiritual herb, and a surge of uncontrollable joy flooded his heart. It's actually the 9-yang divine mushroom. The low murmur echoed in Mu Chen's mind, filled with elation and excitement. Who would have thought that here, in this place, he would find one of the 3 rare treasures he needed for cultivating the Great Sun indestructible body? The 3 treasures required for the cultivation of the Great Sun indestructible body were extremely rare, so much so that even beings at the supreme level would be drawn to them. Even within the Spirit Value Hall at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Mu Chen had never received any information about these treasures, which had left him feeling anxious. Though he was currently only in the late stages of heaven reaching, he had to plan ahead. Otherwise, when he eventually reached the supreme level, having such a powerful supreme body but lacking the necessary materials for cultivation would be a source of great distress. However, Mu Chen also knew that these 3 treasures were too rare, and collecting them wouldn't be easy. So when he unexpectedly found a 9-yang divine mushroom here, he was naturally overjoyed. A surge of ancient information flooded his mind. After a while, the images in his mind gradually faded. He slowly opened his eyes, and the joy was still evident on his handsome face. "How's it going?" Luo Li asked curiously. It was rare to see Mu Chen express such obvious delight. "We've really found a treasure this time." Mu Chen took a deep breath, then smiled. Su Huang and the others looked at each other, puzzled. The ancient ruins we entered before should belong to an ancient sect called the Divine Wood Temple from the primordial era. However, that wasn't the true Divine Wood Temple ruins, it was merely a small branch. The actual and complete Divine Wood Temple ruins are hidden within this wooden stele. Su Huang and the others widened their eyes in disbelief. The ruins they had entered were merely a small branch of the Divine Wood Temple? If a mere branch could be so tempting, what kind of incredible treasures would the real Divine Wood Temple ruins hold? Where are the Divine Wood Temple ruins? Su Huang couldn't help but ask. It will guide us. Mu Chen smiled slightly, but then furrowed his brow and added, however, it seems that there are more branch ruins like the one we encountered before, scattered across this shattered relic continent. Therefore, we can't rule out that other teams may have obtained this information as well. These teams will surely be among the strongest, and if we want to venture into the Divine Wood Temple ruins, the opponents we face may be even stronger than Xiaohou and Zhenqing. Su Huang, Zhao Qishan, and Mu Fingyang's expressions grew serious. This time, they had already encountered danger when facing Xiaohou and Zhenqing. If the next team they met was even stronger, With their current fighting ability, they might be in real trouble. After all, the strongest in their group were Chen and Luo Li, and the other three had begun to feel like a burden. Over the next period, we won't make any other plans, Chen said, looking at Su Huang and the others. This place is so remote, it's perfect for us to cultivate. Therefore, we need to go into seclusion for a while. Our strength must be enhanced again. Not only Su Huang, but even Chen himself needed to break through. The Spiritual Academy Grand Competition had already entered its main phase, and as time went on, more and more powerful teams would emerge. Plus, with the various ancient ruins scattered across the relic continent, no one could guarantee that a team wouldn't gain an incredible opportunity, causing their strength to skyrocket and leaving all others in the dust. Faced with this situation, Chen's current strength, being in the late heaven-reaching stage, was no longer enough to maintain absolute confidence. Although he had won his battle against Xiaoho, it had come at a significant cost. The truth was, his power at the late heaven-reaching stage wasn't sufficient to support him in a full-fledged battle against experts who had undergone the spiritual energy tribulation. Therefore, Chen knew that he had to break through now, and overcome the first of the three minor tribulations, the physical body tribulation. Su Huang and the others nodded heavily. Before, it had always been Chen and Luo Li fighting for the team, which made them feel a little guilty. Now, having obtained the divine spirit fruit in the ruins with its protection, they were ready to attempt the physical body tribulation. If they succeeded, the team's overall strength would rise tremendously. At the very least, Chen and Luo Li wouldn't have to worry as much about protecting them. Seeing their serious expressions, Chen smiled. He then tightly gripped the ancient wooden stele in his hand, his gaze sharp. When he had previously gathered all the information from the stele, he had also found something that stirred his heart. It was a divine art engraved within the wooden stele,